Song of the Heart. Chapter 1. The Silent Symphony. She hummed quietly and felt the music in her whole body as always. Today it took the morning crisp, rising sun and surrounding waking city as its melody. Oh, how many times she had wanted to sing out loud. As a young girl, she had learned to hide the tears of frustration during the music lessons in school when someone else sang the song she wanted to let out. But when it came her turn and she tried, her voice broke and cracked in her throat, and the pained glimpse of the music teacher crushed the last hope she had. But no hurt had removed her inner music. She had thought about starting to do songwriting, but if she tried to write it down, then came the quiet moment, which was more than painful, and stopped only when she thought, or said out loud, that okay, I will not write any song to be sung by others. Her steps echoed like drums when she turned onto the side street, and the melody wanted her to take a running step every here and there. That made her smile until she was at the door. With a sigh, she grabbed the door handle and stepped into the office. The floor had a sound of its own, and the melody evolved. It took the turns of the day ahead as she prepared to reach the HR department. Aurora loved her job at Meridian Corp, even if it wasn't exactly what she'd dreamed of as a child. Processing new employee paperwork, conducting orientation sessions, managing benefits. It was steady, quiet work that let her inner symphony play without interruption. Most people found HR boring, but Aurora heard music in everything. The rhythm of keyboards clicking, the percussion of filing cabinets closing, the gentle melody of comfortable workplace conversations. Today was supposed to be routine. 3 new hires to process, 2 exit interviews, and a meeting with the facilities manager about the broken air conditioning in Conference Room B. Nothing that should have made her heart race or her perpetual inner soundtrack skip a beat. But as she settled at her desk with her morning coffee, the melody that had been accompanying her since she woke up began to change. Instead of the familiar urban symphony of traffic and construction and daily life, something else was weaving through the music. Something she'd never heard before, but somehow recognized. It was beautiful, haunting, like hearing a half-remembered lullaby or catching a glimpse of a dream just before waking. The melody made her chest ache with longing for something she couldn't name. "Aurora?" Her colleague Janet poked her head around the partition. "The new hire is here for his 10 o'clock orientation. Conference room A?" Aurora blinked, realizing she'd been sitting frozen at her desk, her coffee growing cold as she listened to music that existed only in her head. "Right, yes, send him in, please." But as Janet disappeared, the mysterious melody grew stronger. Aurora found herself unconsciously humming along, and for the first time in 15 years, the humming felt like it wanted to become something more. Like her voice was trying to break free from whatever had kept it locked away since childhood. She was still puzzling over this strange sensation when the conference room door opened. The man who walked in was tall and lean, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it and eyes the colour of storm clouds. He moved with an easy grace that made Aurora think of dancers or musicians, people who understood their bodies as instruments. But it was his presence that truly caught her attention. The way the air seemed to shift around him. The way her inner music suddenly became richer, more complex, as if someone had added new instruments to her personal orchestra. "Miss Chen?" His voice was warm and deep, with the slightest hint of an accent she couldn't place. "I'm Gabriel Thorne. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Please, have a seat." Aurora gestured to the chair across from her, trying to ignore the way his presence seemed to make the conference room hum with energy. "Welcome to Meridian Corporation. I see you'll be joining our consulting department?" Gabriel's smile was enigmatic. "Something like that. I specialize in helping people find their voices." The words hit Aurora like a physical blow. She stared at him, wondering if there was some kind of cosmic joke at play. Find their voices. Communication coaching, primarily. Public speaking, presentation skills, helping executives connect with their authentic selves. Gabriel leaned forward slightly, and Aurora noticed that his eyes seemed to hold depths that went far beyond their storm-grey surface. You'd be surprised how many people go through life feeling like they have something important to say, but can't figure out how to say it. Aurora's throat tightened. Yes, I imagine that would be frustrating. Devastating, actually, Gabriel said softly, and something in his tone made Aurora look at him more closely. When you have music inside you that you can't share with the world, it's like slowly suffocating. The conference room fell silent, except for the distant hum of office machinery and Aurora's suddenly rapid heartbeat. There was no way Gabriel could know about her music, about the songs that lived in her head, but could never make it past her lips. No way he could understand the exact nature of her private torment. And yet the way he was looking at her. How did you... Aurora began, then stopped herself. I mean, your resume is very impressive. You've worked with some notable clients. Gabriel's expression grew gentle, almost apologetic. Aurora, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you have the most beautiful music I've ever heard. Aurora's coffee cup slipped from her nerveless fingers, splashing across the conference table. I'm sorry, what? The music, the symphony that's always playing around you. Gabriel reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of touching her hand. You can hear it, can't you? In everything. The city waking up, footsteps on different floors, the way conversations create rhythms and melodies. Aurora stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. You can hear my music? Not just hear it, I can see it. Gabriel's eyes held wonder and something that looked like recognition. Colours and light that move with every melody, patterns that shift with your emotions. Right now it's silver and blue with threads of gold, and it's the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. Aurora felt the world tilt around her. For 15 years she had believed her music was purely internal, a private consolation for the voice she couldn't use. The idea that someone else could perceive it, could see it as something beautiful rather than shameful. This isn't possible, she whispered. Isn't it? Gabriel stood up slowly, moving around the table until he was standing beside her chair. Aurora, has anyone ever told you that your voice matters? That the music inside you is meant to be shared? My voice doesn't work, Aurora said, the old pain rising in her throat. I tried to sing when I was little, and I can't. It just breaks and cracks and sounds awful. Show me. What? Sing for me, right now, just a few notes. Aurora shook her head frantically. No, I can't. I told you, my voice doesn't work. I sound terrible. Aurora. Gabriel knelt beside her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers. I'm going to tell you something that might sound crazy, but I need you to trust me. Your voice doesn't break because you can't sing. It breaks because what you're trying to express is too powerful for an ordinary human voice to contain. I don't understand. Your grandmother, Gabriel said softly. Did she ever tell you stories about women in your family who could sing storms to sleep, or call rain with their voices? Aurora's breath caught. How could you possibly know about? Those were just fairy tales, stories she made up. Were they? Gabriel's eyes held infinite compassion. Aurora, you're not human, not entirely. You're a song weaver, a descendant of the sirens, the first singers whose voices could shape reality itself. Your music doesn't just express emotion, it has the power to heal, to transform, to create. That's impossible. Is it? Haven't you always felt different? Haven't you always known that the music inside you was more than just melodies? Gabriel stood, extending his hand to her. Haven't you always wondered why you could hear the songs in everything around you when no one else seemed to notice? Aurora stared at his outstretched hand, her mind reeling. Everything he was saying sounded insane, but it also explained so much. The way music seemed to live in her body, the overwhelming need to sing that had haunted her since childhood, the dream she sometimes had of standing on cliff tops and calling to the sea. "What are you?" she asked. Gabriel smiled, and for a moment, Aurora could swear she saw something otherworldly flicker behind his human appearance. "I'm what you might call a voice keeper. I help lost singers remember what they're capable of. I've been looking for you for a very long time, Aurora." "Looking for me?" The songweavers were scattered generations ago, their abilities suppressed or forgotten. But the songs themselves never died. They just went underground, hiding in bloodlines, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Gabriel's voice grew urgent. "Aurora, the world needs your voice. There are places where the harmony has been broken, where only a true songweaver can restore the balance." Aurora felt tears pricking her eyes. "But I can't sing. I've tried so many times, and I can't." "Because you've been trying to sing human songs with a siren's voice," Gabriel said gently, and Aurora could see a hint of smile. "It's like trying to contain an ocean in a teacup, but if you let me help you, if you trust me to guide you back to your true voice, what would happen? You would become who you were always meant to be, and the music that's been trapped inside you for all these years would finally be free." Aurora looked around the mundane conference room with its beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights, then back at Gabriel, who stood before her like an invitation to step closer and then step into a story she'd never dared to dream. The music inside her surged, stronger than it had ever been, as if responding to the possibility of finally being heard. "How?" she whispered. Gabriel's smile was radiant. "First, we get you somewhere you can sing without worrying about the whole building hearing you. Then, we help you remember the songs your ancestors sang when the world was young." Chapter 2: The True Voice. Gabriel led Aurora out of the office building and through the city streets, following a path that seemed to bend away from the busy intersections toward quieter, older parts of town. Aurora had called in sick for the rest of the day, something she'd never done before, but the urgency in Gabriel's voice had convinced her that this couldn't wait. "Where are we going?" she asked, as they walked down a narrow alley she'd never noticed before, despite working in this area for 3 years. "Somewhere where the barriers between worlds are thin," Gabriel replied. "Somewhere your voice can reach its full potential, without causing complications." "What kind of complications?" Gabriel glanced at her, his expression serious. "Songweaver voices have power, Aurora. Real power. When you sing with your true voice, things happen. Weather changes, hearts heal. Sometimes reality itself shifts to accommodate the song. We need to be somewhere that can contain and channel that energy safely." They emerged from the alley onto a street Aurora didn't recognize, lined with buildings that looked far older than anything else in this part of the city. At the end of the street stood a music shop, its windows filled with instruments that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Harmonic Convergence," Aurora read from the faded sign above the door. "I've never seen this place before." "Most people can't see it unless they need to," Gabriel said, pushing open the door. A bell chimed with a sound so pure it made Aurora's heart skip a beat. Inside, the shop was impossibly vast, with rows upon rows of instruments stretching back into shadows that seemed deeper than the building could possibly contain. Violins hung from the ceiling like sleeping birds, their strings humming softly in harmonies that shifted with Aurora's breathing. Drums of every size and description lined the walls, their surfaces decorated with symbols that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. But it was the piano in the centre of the shop that drew her attention, a magnificent grand piano that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of midnight dark wood, its keys gleaming like pearls in the strange, sourceless light that filled the space. "Welcome," said a voice from behind the counter. Aurora turned to see an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that held the depth of centuries. "I've been expecting you, child." "This is Melody," Gabriel said, by way of introduction. "She's the keeper of this place." "Melody," Aurora repeated, then felt foolish. "Is that really your name?" The old woman laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "It's the name that matters here. Names have power, you know? Just like songs." "Gabriel tells me I'm a song weaver." Aurora felt ridiculous saying it. "Oh, child, you're much more than that." Melody moved around the counter with surprising grace, her movements creating small musical phrases in the air. "You're the first true song weaver to awaken in over 50 years. The bloodline has been sleeping, waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst." "Catalyst?" Melody gestured toward Gabriel. "Voice keepers are born, not made, but they only manifest their abilities when a song weaver needs to be awakened. Gabriel's gift has been dormant his entire life, waiting for you." Aurora looked at Gabriel with new understanding. "So you're not just helping me, I'm helping you become what you're supposed to be too." "We are completing each other," Gabriel confirmed. "Voice keepers and song weavers are meant to work in pairs. One cannot reach their full potential without the other." Melody nodded approvingly. "Now, shall we see what that beautiful voice of yours can really do?" Aurora felt the familiar panic rising in her throat. "I can't. I've told you both. When I try to sing, my voice just—" "Your voice breaks because you're trying to force it into patterns it was never meant to follow," Melody interrupted gently. "Human songs, human melodies, human limitations. But you, dear child, are not human." "I feel human." "Do you?" Gabriel moved to stand beside the piano. "When you listen to music, do you just hear notes and rhythms? Or do you see colours, feel emotions that aren't your own, sense stories being told in frequencies beyond normal hearing?" Aurora stared at him and the soft colours she could see as shadows around him. "Everyone doesn't experience music that way." "No, love," Melody said softly. "They don't. What you experience is true sight, true hearing. You perceive music as it really is, not just sound, but the fundamental force that shapes reality itself." Gabriel sat down at the piano bench and placed his hands on the keys. "May I?" Aurora nodded, not trusting her voice. Gabriel began to play, and the music that flowed from the instrument was unlike anything Aurora had ever heard. It wasn't a song so much as a conversation, melodies that asked questions and even touched her skin, harmonies that offered answers, rhythms that spoke directly to her heart without bothering with her ears. But more than that, the music was calling to something deep inside her, something that had been locked away since childhood. She felt it stirring, uncoiling, preparing to answer Gabriel's musical invitation. "Let it out," Gabriel said softly, his hands never stopping their dance across the keys. "Don't try to control it or shape it. Just let it be what it wants to be." Aurora opened her mouth, expecting the familiar crack and break that had silenced her for so many years. But what emerged was not her small, human voice. It was power made audible. The sound that flowed from her throat was rich and complex, layered with harmonies that no single human voice should have been able to produce. It rose and fell like ocean waves, carrying with it the memory of storms and the promise of calm seas. The very air around them began to shimmer, and Aurora could see her music for the first time, more than in simple colours. Streams of silver and gold light that danced through the space, touching every instrument in the shop and making them sing in response. Gabriel's playing shifted to support her voice, creating a foundation of sound that allowed her song to soar even higher. Together, their music filled the impossible space of the shop, carried each other, spilling out into dimensions Aurora hadn't known existed. When the song and the intense closeness with Gabriel finally ended, Aurora stood in stunned silence, her hand pressed to her throat in amazement. "I did that," she whispered. "That was really my voice." "That was your true voice," Melody confirmed, her eyes bright with tears. "The voice of your bloodline, the gift of your ancestors." "It was beautiful," Gabriel said, standing from the piano bench. "Aurora, what you just did, I've never heard anything like it." Aurora felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but for the first time in her adult life, they were tears of joy rather than frustration. "I can sing. I can actually sing." "You can do much more than sing," Melody said. "With proper training, with Gabriel to anchor and amplify your abilities, you could heal the sick, calm storms, even mend the broken places in the world where harmony has been lost." "Broken places?" Gabriel's expression grew serious. "There are wounds in the world, Aurora. Places where conflict and hatred have torn holes in the fabric of reality itself. They spread like infections, causing more discord, more pain. Only a songweaver's voice can heal them." "And you think I can do that?" "I know you can," Gabriel said with absolute certainty. "But first, you need to learn to control your gift. Songweaver voices are powerful. They can cause as much harm as healing if they're not properly channeled." Melody moved to a shelf lined with ancient-looking books. "These contain the old songs, the melodies your ancestors used to shape the world. But learning them will take time and practice and—" She glanced meaningfully at Gabriel. "A very strong bond with your voice keeper." "What kind of bond?" Aurora asked, though something in her already knew the answer. "The deepest kind," Gabriel said softly. "Songweavers and voice keepers don't just work together, Aurora. They're bound together, heart and soul and voice. It's the only way the magic can reach its full potential." Aurora felt her pulse quicken. "Bound how?" "Through choice," Melody said firmly. "Always through choice. The bond cannot be forced or coerced. It must be freely given by both parties." Aurora looked at Gabriel, seeing in his eyes the same wonder and recognition she felt in her own heart. "And if we choose not to bond?" Even saying that sounded somehow painful to her ears. "Then you remain as you are, able to sing, but never reaching your full potential, safe, but limited." Gabriel stepped closer to her. "Aurora, I want you to know that whatever you choose, I'll respect it. I would never pressure you into—" "What would the bond mean?" Aurora interrupted. "Practically speaking." Gabriel and Melody exchanged a look. "It would mean your lives becoming intertwined in ways that go beyond the physical," Melody explained. "Your emotions would be shared, your dreams would sometimes overlap. You would be able to communicate without words, to support each other's magic even across great distances." "And romantically?" Aurora asked, her cheeks warming. "The bond often leads to romantic love," Gabriel said quietly. "But it doesn't require it. The connection is deeper than romance. It's a joining of souls that transcends ordinary relationships." Aurora walked to the window, looking out at the street that had somehow transported them from her mundane life to this place of magic and possibility. Everything Gabriel was offering sounded like a fairy tale, too good to be true. But then she remembered the feeling of her true voice flowing free, the joy of finally expressing the music that had lived inside her for so long, now together. Could she really go back to humming quietly to herself after experiencing that? "If I agree to this bond," she said without turning around, "what would our lives look like?" "We would step away from current life, travel together, seeking out the broken places that need healing. We would learn the old songs, explore the limits of what our combined voices can accomplish." Gabriel's voice grew warm. "We would make music together, Aurora. Real music, the kind that changes the world." Aurora turned back to face them, her decision crystallizing. And if something goes wrong? If we're not compatible, or if the bond doesn't work? Then we find another way, Gabriel said simply. Aurora, I've waited my entire life to meet you. I'm not going to let fear of what might go wrong keep us from discovering what might go right. Looking into his storm-grey eyes, Aurora felt the same certainty. She had spent 15 years being afraid. Afraid to sing, afraid to hope, afraid to believe she might have something valuable to offer the world. She was tired of being afraid. All right, she said, her voice strong and clear. Let's do it. Let's see what we can become together. Gabriel's smile was radiant as he stepped closer, and Melody clapped her hands in delight. Wonderful, the old woman said. Now, let's begin your real education. There's so much to learn, and the world has been waiting for your voice for far too long. As Aurora took her place beside Gabriel at the piano, he reached his hand to gently touch her cheek before starting to play. She felt the music inside her swell with anticipation. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 3. The Song of Binding. The bonding ceremony took place at sunset in a grove hidden deep within the city's largest park, a place that existed in the spaces between ordinary reality, accessible only to those who knew the old songs. Aurora had spent the past week learning the fundamentals of Songweaver magic under Melody's patient guidance. She discovered that her voice could indeed do miraculous things, heal small wounds, encourage flowers to bloom out of season, even influence the weather on a minor scale. But all of these abilities were magnified exponentially when Gabriel joined his voice to hers. Their voices complemented each other perfectly. Where Aurora's was wild and oceanic, Gabriel's was steady and grounding. Where his was precise and controlled, hers added spontaneous beauty. Together, they created harmonies that neither could achieve alone. Are you nervous? Gabriel asked, as they walked hand in hand through the grove. Other figures moved between the trees, beings that looked human but carried themselves with the otherworldly grace of those who existed partially in multiple realms. Terrified, Aurora admitted, but also excited. I keep thinking this is all a dream, and I'm going to wake up in my cubicle tomorrow morning. It's not a dream, Gabriel assured her with a brush of his thumb over her palm. Though I understand why it feels like one. A couple weeks ago, I was a corporate consultant with a strange sensitivity to sound. Now I'm about to bond my soul to a songweaver in a magical grove. It's a lot to process. They reached the centre of the grove, where Melody waited beside a circle of standing stones that hummed with their own internal music. Each stone was carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change in the twilight, and the space between them shimmered with energy that made Aurora's teeth ache. The Circle of First Songs, Melody announced. These stones have witnessed every songweaver voice keeper bonding for the past 1,000 years. They remember the music, and they'll help guide your own. Aurora looked around the circle, suddenly aware of the weight of history and tradition surrounding them. What if we're not ready? What if we mess something up? The stones won't let you, said a new voice. Aurora turned to see a tall woman with silver-streaked hair approaching them. I'm Lyrian, the current High Songweaver. I'll be overseeing your bonding. High Songweaver? Aurora felt even more intimidated. Think of me as the keeper of the old traditions, Lyrian said with a gentle smile. I ensure that the ancient knowledge isn't lost, and I help new songweavers find their place in the world. Gabriel squeezed Aurora's hand reassuringly. We're ready. Are you? Lyrian studied them both with eyes that seemed to see far more than what was on the surface. Bonding is permanent, and it will change you both in ways you can't imagine. Your emotions will be shared, your dreams will intertwine, your very life forces will be connected. There's no undoing it. We understand, Aurora said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Then let us begin. Lyrian gestured for them to step into the circle. The moment Aurora's feet crossed the threshold, she felt power flowing through her like electricity. The stones began to glow with soft, multicoloured light, and the air itself seemed to thicken with magic. Face each other, Lyrian instructed. Join hands and open your hearts to the possibility of complete connection. Aurora looked into Gabriel's eyes and felt the same certainty she'd experienced all week. This was right. This was meant to be. This was what she'd been unconsciously searching for her entire life. The bonding song will come to you naturally, Lyrian continued. Don't think about the words or the melody. Let your souls speak to each other directly. Gabriel began to hum, a low, resonant sound that Aurora felt in her bones. Without conscious thought, she joined her voice to his, and immediately the humming transformed into something larger, more complex. The song that emerged wasn't in any language Aurora recognized, but she understood its meaning perfectly. It spoke of two souls recognizing each other across time and space, of voices that were meant to harmony, of love that transcended the boundaries of individual existence. As they sang, Aurora felt something fundamental shifting inside her. The barriers she'd built around her heart, the fears that had kept her small and quiet for so many years, began to dissolve. In their place, she felt Gabriel's presence, not invasive or overwhelming, but warm and supportive, like a foundation she could build anything on. Through their growing connection, she could sense his emotions as wonder, joy, deep tenderness, and underneath it all, a love so profound it took her breath away. But more than that, she could feel his voice not just with her ears but with her entire being, as if he were singing directly into her soul. The stones around them pulsed brighter, their ancient music joining the song Aurora and Gabriel created together. The very air began to shimmer, and Aurora realized she could see their combined music. Streams of gold and silver light that danced between them, growing stronger and more complex with each note. Then, at the song's climax, something extraordinary happened. The separate streams of their music merged into a single brilliant chord of light that wrapped around them both, binding them together in a way that was deeper than marriage, more permanent than any earthly promise. Aurora felt the moment of complete connection, like a physical shock. Suddenly, she wasn't just Aurora anymore. She was Aurora and Gabriel, two voices that had become one song, two hearts that beat in perfect synchronization. When the music finally faded, they stood in the circle still holding hands, but now Aurora could feel Gabriel's pulse as clearly as her own. His emotions flowed through her like a gentle current, and she knew that hers were doing the same to him. "It's done," Lyrian said with satisfaction. "You are bound, now and always. Voice keeper and song weaver, partners in magic and in life." Aurora looked at Gabriel and saw her own amazement reflected in his eyes. "I can feel you," she whispered. "Inside my heart, inside my head. It's like we're sharing the same soul." "We are, in a way," Gabriel said softly. "How do you feel about that?" Aurora considered the question seriously. The connection was more intimate than anything she'd ever experienced, but it didn't feel invasive or frightening. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Complete," she said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete." Gabriel's smile was radiant, and through their bond, Aurora felt his joy amplifying her own until she thought she might burst with happiness. "Now," Melody said, approaching them with a leather-bound book in her hands, "your real work begins. This contains the locations of the broken places, the wounds in the world that need healing. Some are ancient, some are recent, but all of them require the combined power of a bonded pair to mend." Aurora accepted the book with trembling hands. "Where do we start?" "Close to home," Lyrian suggested. "There's a place of great sadness about 50 miles north of the city. a battlefield where too many died in anger and fear. The land itself has been poisoned by the violence, and nothing will grow there. It would be good practice for you both." "When do we leave?" Gabriel asked. "Tomorrow, if you're ready." "But tonight?" Melody smiled mysteriously. "Tonight is for celebration. You've found each other, you've bonded, and you're about to embark on the greatest adventure two souls can share. That deserves acknowledgement." As if summoned by her words, music began to play from somewhere in the grove, not performed by any visible musicians, but arising from the trees and stones themselves. Other song weavers and voice keepers emerged from the shadows, and Aurora realized they were all invited to a celebration that had been spontaneously created just for them. "Dance with me," Gabriel said, offering her his hand with a courtly bow. Aurora laughed, feeling lighter than she had since childhood. "I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," Gabriel admitted, "but I have a feeling we'll figure it out together." They moved into the center of the grove, and Aurora discovered that Gabriel was right. With their voices and souls now connected, they moved together as if they'd been dancing partners for years. The music flowed around them and through them, and Aurora realized that this was what her life would be like now, filled with magic and music and the constant comforting presence of someone who understood her completely. As they spun under the stars, surrounded by the music of their new community, Aurora felt the last of her old fears falling away. She had found her voice, her purpose, and her perfect harmony. Tomorrow, they would begin healing the world's broken places, but tonight, they celebrated the miracle of two souls becoming one song. Chapter 4: The Healing Song. The battlefield was exactly as Lyrian had described, a barren stretch of land where nothing had grown for over a century. Aurora and Gabriel stood at its edge, feeling the waves of old anger and pain that still emanated from the scarred earth. "I can hear it," Aurora shivered. "The screaming, the grief. It's like an endless discordant note that never resolves." Gabriel nodded, his face grim. The violence here was so intense that it left an actual wound in reality. The land remembers, and it can't let go of the trauma. They had spent the morning studying the healing songs in Melody's ancient book, learning how their combined voices could cleanse spiritual wounds and restore natural harmony. But standing here, facing the magnitude of the damage, Aurora felt overwhelmed. "What if we're not strong enough?" she asked. "What if we make it worse?" Gabriel took her hand, and immediately she felt his calm confidence flowing through their bond. "We are strong enough," he said with quiet certainty. "Together, we can do this." They walked to the center of the battlefield, where the sense of wrongness was strongest. Aurora could feel the earth beneath her feet recoiling from their touch, as if it had forgotten how to accept comfort. "The song needs to acknowledge the pain first," Gabriel said, consulting their notes. "We can't just cover over the trauma. We have to help the land process it, accept it, and then release it." Aurora nodded, closing her eyes and reaching out with her enhanced senses to feel the full scope of the spiritual wound. It was vast, deep, infected with decades of unresolved anguish. But underneath the pain, she could sense something else, the land's desperate desire to heal, to grow, to support life again. "I hear it," she whispered. "The earth wants to be whole. It just doesn't know how." Gabriel positioned himself facing her, their hands joined in the ancient pattern Melody had taught them. "Then let's show it." Aurora began to sing, her voice carrying all the sorrow she could feel in the wounded land. The song was heartbreaking, full of grief and loss, and the kind of pain that seemed too deep to ever heal. But she didn't flinch from it. She let herself become a vessel for the battlefield's anguish, giving voice to emotions that had been trapped here for a century. Gabriel's voice joined hers, providing harmony and support, anchoring her as she dove deeper into the spiritual wound. Together, they sang the story of the battle, the fear of young soldiers, the grief of families who would never see their loved ones again, the senseless waste of lives cut short by conflict. But gradually, the song began to change. Where there had been only sorrow, Aurora began to weave in threads of understanding, acceptance, and eventually, hope. She sang of the courage those soldiers had shown, of the love that had motivated their sacrifice, of the peace that had eventually come from their loss. Gabriel's voice grew stronger, supporting her as she reached for the most difficult part of the healing, teaching the land to forgive, not to forget the pain, but to transform it into something that could nurture new life instead of perpetuating old death. The earth beneath them began to respond. Aurora felt the spiritual wound slowly opening, releasing decades of trapped emotion in waves that made her stagger. But she held on, continuing to sing, letting the land's pain flow through her voice and transform into something cleaner, lighter. As their song reached its climax, something miraculous happened. The barren soil at their feet began to crack, and tiny green shoots pushed through, not just grass, but wildflowers that bloomed as they watched, spreading outward in an ever-widening circle of new life. When they finally fell silent, exhausted but triumphant, the entire battlefield had been transformed. Where there had been only dead earth, now there was a meadow filled with flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "We did it," Aurora breathed, barely able to believe what she was seeing. Gabriel pulled her close, both of them swaying with exhaustion. "You did it," he corrected. "I've never heard anything as beautiful or as powerful as your voice in that moment." Through their bond, Aurora could feel his awe and admiration, but also something deeper, a love so profound it made her heart ache with joy. "We did it together," she insisted. "I couldn't have gone that deep without you anchoring me." They stood in the centre of the miraculous meadow, holding each other and marvelling at what their combined voices had accomplished. But their moment of peace was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. "Impressive," said a cold voice. Aurora turned to see a man in an expensive suit walking toward them across the newly bloomed field. He was really old, middle-aged, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. Something about him made her skin crawl. "Who are you?" Gabriel asked, automatically moving to place himself between Aurora and the stranger. "Dr. Marcus Vex," the man replied with a smile that never reached his eyes. "I represent certain interests that have been monitoring Songweaver activity." "What kind of interests?" Aurora demanded. "The kind that understand the true potential of your abilities," Vex said smoothly. "Do you have any idea what you just accomplished? You literally rewrote the fundamental nature of matter at the molecular level. The applications for that kind of power are endless." Gabriel's grip on Aurora's hand tightened. "We're not interested in whatever you're selling." "Oh, but you should be," Vex continued, apparently unbothered by their hostility. "Think of what you could accomplish with proper funding, proper resources. You could heal more than old battlefields. You could cure diseases, reverse environmental damage, even extend human lifespan indefinitely." "By doing what, exactly?" Aurora asked, though she was already afraid she knew the answer. "By allowing us to study your abilities, to understand how they work, to find ways to replicate them." Vex's eyes gleamed with avarice. "Imagine if we could teach ordinary humans to sing with your power. Imagine the good we could do. And imagine the profit you could make," Gabriel said sarcastically. "Well, yes, there would be financial benefits," Vex admitted without shame. "But think of the greater good. No more war, no more famine, no more death from disease or old age. You could usher in a new golden age for humanity." Aurora felt sick. "You want to weaponize our voices?" "I want to democratize them," Vex corrected. "Why should such incredible power be limited to a handful of individuals? Why shouldn't everyone have access to this kind of magic?" "Because it doesn't work that way," Gabriel said firmly. Songweaver abilities are tied to bloodline, to soul-deep connections that can't be replicated or mass-produced. So you say, Vex replied, but our scientists believe otherwise. With the right incentives, I'm sure you could be persuaded to assist in our research. The temperature around them dropped noticeably as Gabriel's anger manifested. Are you threatening us? Not at all, Vex said, his smile becoming even more predatory. I'm simply pointing out that you're very valuable, and valuable things sometimes need protection. It would be unfortunate if something happened to either of you before you could reach your full potential. Aurora felt fear spike through their bond, but it wasn't her fear. It was Gabriel's. Fear for her safety rather than his own. You need to leave, Aurora said, her voice carrying undertones of power that made the newly grown flowers around them sway. Now. Of course, Vex said easily. But think about what I've said. You have a gift that could change the world. It would be selfish to keep it to yourselves. He turned and walked away across the meadow, leaving Aurora and Gabriel alone among the flowers they had called into being. He's not going to give up, Gabriel said grimly. No, Aurora agreed. And he's not the only one who'll want to use our abilities for their own purposes. They stood in silence for a moment, the joy of their successful healing dampened by the encounter with Vex. Are you having second thoughts? Gabriel asked quietly. Aurora considered the question seriously. The life they were choosing would clearly be more dangerous than she had imagined. There would always be people who wanted to exploit their gifts, who saw them as weapons or resources rather than individuals. But then she looked around at the meadow they had created, at the life they had restored to dead ground, and felt the deep satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. No, she said firmly. This is who we're meant to be. Whatever the risks, whatever the challenges, we're meant to heal the world's broken places. Gabriel's relief flowed through their bond, followed by renewed determination. Then we keep doing what we're doing, but we also stay alert and we learn to protect ourselves. Agreed. Aurora took his hand, drawing strength from their connection. Come on, let's go home and tell Melody what happened. Something tells me she's dealt with people like Vex before. As they walked away from the battlefield-turned meadow, Aurora felt the weight of destiny settling around them. Their journey was just beginning, and there would be challenges they couldn't even imagine yet. But they would face them together, two voices joined in perfect harmony, ready to sing healing into a broken world, no matter who tried to stop them. Epilogue: The symphony continues. 1 year later. Aurora stood on the balcony of their new home, a renovated lighthouse on the coast, where the sound of crashing waves provided a constant symphony to accompany their work. In the distance, she could see the island they had healed last month, where a toxic spill had poisoned the water for decades until their combined voices had cleansed it. The morning reports, Gabriel said, joining her with a stack of letters from around the world. People had begun to hear about the mysterious healers who could restore damaged lands and broken hearts, and the requests for help had been pouring in. Anything urgent? Aurora asked, accepting her coffee gratefully. 3 environmental disasters, 2 areas where wars have left spiritual wounds, and... Gabriel smiled as he held up a particular letter. A request from a children's hospital. They want to know if we can help young patients who have lost the will to live. Aurora's heart clenched. We have to go. I knew you'd say that, Gabriel said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. I've already booked us flights for tomorrow. Their work had taken them around the world in the past year, from rainforests poisoned by mining to cities where violence had left scars that went deeper than buildings. With each healing, Aurora had grown stronger and more confident in her abilities. More importantly, her bond with Gabriel had deepened into something that went beyond magical partnership. Any word from Melody about the new students? Aurora asked. Gabriel nodded. 3 more song weavers have awakened in the past month. Melody thinks our high-profile work is inspiring dormant bloodlines to remember what they're capable of. It was true. Their healing of the ancient battlefield had somehow catalyzed something larger. All over the world, people with songweaver heritage were beginning to hear music in new ways, to feel the call of their ancestral gifts. Voice keepers were manifesting too, drawn to their awakening partners. Good, Aurora said with satisfaction. The world needs more healers. And fewer people like Vex, Gabriel added darkly. They had encountered Dr. Vex and his organisation several more times over the past year. Each confrontation had been more serious than the last, as Vex became increasingly desperate to capture and study a songweaver. But they had also gained allies, other magical beings who recognised the importance of keeping such power out of corporate hands. Speaking of which, Gabriel continued, Lyrian called this morning. She thinks she's found a way to permanently shield songweavers from technological surveillance, something about using the old songs to create a kind of auditory camouflage. Brilliant, Aurora said. The last thing we need is satellites tracking our healing work. Gabriel wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Aurora leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat synchronizing with hers. Through their bond, she could sense his deep contentment, his joy in the life they had built together. Do you ever miss your old life? He asked softly. The simplicity of working in HR, not having to worry about saving the world? Aurora considered the question seriously. Do you know what I miss most about my old life? What? The way I used to think my music didn't matter. The way I believed I had nothing important to offer the world. Aurora turned in his arms to face him. I wouldn't trade a single day of this for the safety of my old existence. Gabriel's smile was radiant. Even when we're dodging corporate spies and healing places that try to drain the life out of us. Especially then, Aurora said firmly. Because every place we heal, every song we sing together, every person whose hope we restore, it all matters. We're making the world more beautiful, more harmonious, more whole. Together, Gabriel added, the word carrying all the weight of their bond. Together, Aurora agreed. In the distance, the sound of dolphins singing drifted across the water, a reminder that their work had reached even the ocean's depths, where their voices had healed underwater forests and restored the songs of whales. Aurora closed her eyes and let herself feel the vast symphony of the world around them, the percussion of waves against rocks, the melody of wind through seagrass, the harmony of 1,000 different life forms all contributing their voices to the planet's eternal song. And underneath it all, she could hear the music that had started it all, the quiet humming of a lonely woman who had believed her voice didn't matter, transformed into something that could literally change the world. Ready for another day of impossible things? Gabriel asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Aurora opened her eyes and smiled, feeling the music inside her surge with anticipation. Always. Hand in hand, they walked back into their lighthouse home, ready to answer the world's call for healing, ready to prove once again that love and music could overcome any darkness. In the kitchen, their answering machine blinked with dozens of new messages, people desperate for hope, places crying out for restoration, hearts that needed healing. It would be a busy day, and an even busier week. But Aurora no longer felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the world's pain. She had found her voice, her purpose, and her perfect harmony. And with Gabriel beside her, she could face any challenge, heal any wound, transform any sorrow into song. The symphony of their love continued, spreading healing waves across a world that was slowly, surely, learning to sing again. The end.